Most gangster stories build their power from distance. The characters feel bigger than life. The clothes are sharper, the dialogue is cleaner, the violence has rhythm, and every betrayal feels like it belongs in a legend. The Sopranos did something much more uncomfortable. It brought the gangster down to earth and left him there. Tony Soprano is introduced as a mob boss, but the first thing that really defines him is exhaustion. He is tired before the story even begins. He has a mother who drains him, a wife who sees through him, kids who disappoint him in normal teenage ways, a crew full of problems, a business that keeps pulling him into danger, and a body that starts shutting down when he refuses to look at himself honestly. That is one of the first reasons the show feels real. Nobody gets to live inside one identity. Tony is a criminal, a father, a husband, a son, a boss, a patient, a liar, a sentimental man, a bully, a frightened child, and a person who can be generous 5 minutes after being cruel. The show refuses to flatten him into one thing. It also refuses to excuse him. You can understand him without being asked to forgive him. You can laugh with him without forgetting what he is capable of. That tension is the heartbeat of The Sopranos. A lesser show would make Tony's therapy a simple key to the character. He sits down, he opens up, and the audience receives the explanation. The Sopranos makes therapy awkward, repetitive, funny, incomplete, and often useless in exactly the way real self examination can be. Tony goes to Melfi because his body betrays him. The panic attacks force him into a room where words matter more than muscle. He starts talking, but talking does not automatically make him better. Sometimes it makes him more dangerous because he learns new language without changing the behavior underneath it. The therapy scenes feel real because they are full of avoidance. Tony circles the truth. He jokes when he is exposed. He gets angry when he feels small. He turns pain into a performance, and sometimes even he believes the performance. Melfi sits across from him trying to pull meaning out of a man who is trained to treat honesty as weakness. Their conversations rarely end with a clean breakthrough. More often, Tony leaves with a fragment of insight, uses it badly, or buries it under another appetite. That is much closer to real life than the fantasy of one perfect conversation fixing a person. The show also feels real because it understands how families actually argue. The Soprano home has the texture of a house people live in. There are bowls on the counter, televisions running in the background, doors opening and closing, people calling from other rooms, and conversations that start about one thing and turn into something else. Carmela and Tony can argue about money, parenting, betrayal, religion, respectability, and lunch in the same breath. Their marriage feels lived in because the fights carry history. Nobody needs to explain every wound. You can hear old damage in the way they say each other's names. Carmela is a major reason the show never floats away into gangster fantasy. She knows enough to be guilty, denies enough to survive, and feels enough to stay human. Her life is built on compromise. She enjoys the house, the gifts, the status, the safety of money, and she also understands that everything around her has blood behind it. The show does not turn that into one grand speech every episode. It lets the contradiction sit in the kitchen with her. It appears in small moments. Her discomfort around certain people, her anger when Tony's affairs become too obvious, her religious guilt, her jealousy, her pride, her fear of being left with nothing. One of the most real things about Carmela is how practical she is. She is moral when morality protects her sense of herself. She is direct when she has leverage. She is vulnerable when the fantasy begins to crack. Her relationship with Tony has love in it, and resentment, and calculation, and habit. That combination is ugly because it is recognizable. Many shows treat marriage as either romance or war. The Sopranos shows marriage as a long negotiation where affection and punishment can share the same room. The children add another layer of realism because they are never used as simple symbols. Meadow and AJ are often annoying, selfish, smart in one moment, ridiculous in the next, and painfully normal. Meadow's intelligence does not save her from denial. AJ's sensitivity does not become wisdom. They grow up inside a house where everyone knows the truth and everyone has agreed to speak around it. That creates a specific kind of confusion. They are protected by Tony's life and poisoned by it at the same time. They inherit money, fear, entitlement, and emotional weather they did not choose. AJ especially makes the show feel real because his problems never become neat. He is lazy, lost, depressed, spoiled, frightened, and sometimes very funny without meaning to be. The show does not give him a clean, heroic path because many people like AJ never find one. He drifts. He absorbs the worst parts of Tony without having Tony's force. He wants meaning and keeps reaching for shortcuts. His sadness is frustrating because the people around him are frustrated too. The show understands that depression inside a family often arrives mixed with irritation, guilt, impatience, and fear. Nobody handles it beautifully for very long. The realism also comes from the way people talk. The dialogue in The Sopranos rarely sounds polished for the sake of television. Characters interrupt each other. They repeat themselves. They misuse words. They quote things they half understand. They tell stories badly. They make jokes that are funny because they are stupid, petty, or perfectly timed. Paulie can turn one confused sentence into a full personality. Christopher can sound wounded and ridiculous at the same time. Junior can be vicious, poetic, and accidentally hilarious within a single conversation. These people do not speak like writers trying to prove they can write. They speak like people trying to win, hide, impress, avoid, complain, or get through the day. That is why the malapropisms matter. They are easy to treat as jokes, and many of them are jokes, but they also reveal how these characters understand the world. They grab pieces of culture, therapy language, history, movies, religion, and politics, and twist them into whatever serves the moment. Tony hears a concept in therapy and brings it into mob life with half the meaning missing. Christopher wants to be an artist and speaks in borrowed Hollywood language, but he often misunderstands the thing he wants to join. Paulie treats superstition, Catholic fear, street logic, and personal grievance as one operating system. It is funny because it is specific. It feels real because people do this constantly. They take language from places they barely understand and use it to defend who they already are. The show's sense of place also gives it weight. New Jersey is never a vague background. It is strip malls, highways, diners, pork stores, suburban houses, construction sites, offices, back rooms, hospital corridors, and restaurants where everybody seems to know somebody. The world feels mapped. Characters do not float from dramatic set to dramatic set. They drive, they wait, they meet in parking lots. They sit in cars and talk with the engine running. They eat in places with bad lighting. They conduct serious business beside ordinary people having dinner. That geography matters because The Sopranos understands modern crime as something built into everyday commerce. The mob is connected to garbage routes, construction jobs, union deals, gambling, loans, no show work, stolen goods, calling cards, real estate, and small scams that seem almost boring until somebody gets hurt. The show makes crime feel less like a secret kingdom and more like mold behind the wall. You may not see all of it, but it affects the whole structure. The money in the show feels real too. People are always talking about envelopes, points, debts, VIG, jobs, cars, college, houses, inheritances, medical bills, and who owes what. Money is never just decoration. It moves relationships. It creates fear. It measures loyalty. It exposes weakness. When Davy Scatino gets swallowed by Tony's world, The horror comes from how ordinary the beginning feels. A man with a business, a family, and a gambling problem sits down at the wrong game. He thinks he can handle it. He thinks his personal connection to Tony gives him protection. Tony sees the weakness, gives him enough rope, and later acts like the outcome was nature taking its course. That storyline feels real because nobody has to become a cartoon villain for it to happen. Davy lies to himself. Tony lies to himself. The system does exactly what it is designed to do. The store gets busted out, the family gets humiliated, and Tony keeps moving. The show lets the audience feel how evil can happen through routine. No thunder, no grand declaration, just debt, pressure, signatures, and a man realizing far too late that friendship was never the same thing as safety. The Sopranos also feels real because consequences arrive unevenly. In many shows, every action creates an immediate reaction. In life, consequences can disappear for a while and come back when people have almost forgotten the original wound. Richie Aprile returns from prison with old expectations and finds a world that has moved without him. Jackie Jr. grows up around stories he does not understand and tries to live inside a legend that was never meant for him. Adriana gets pulled into the FBI's pressure machine slowly through fear and isolation until her entire life becomes a trap. Vito's secret becomes a crisis because the culture around him cannot survive the truth without turning violent. The show lets consequences ferment. A joke can become a death sentence. A rumor can damage a man more than a beating. A small insult can sit inside someone for years. A debt can become a business collapse. A family secret can become a panic attack. This gives the world a lived in danger. People are not only reacting to the current scene, they are carrying every slight, every humiliation, every old rule, and every private fear into the room with them. Adriana's story may be the strongest example of the show's realism because it avoids easy melodrama for a long time. Her tragedy is built through pressure. She is not a criminal mastermind. She is not innocent in a pure sense either. She lives close to the life, benefits from it, ignores things, and tells herself what she needs to keep loving Christopher. When the FBI grabs her, they do not instantly turn her into a spy thriller character. They scare her, they confuse her, they isolate her, they make the walls smaller. Her scenes feel real because she is always trying to survive the next conversation. She does not have the full picture. She believes there might be a way out because believing that is the only thing keeping her upright. Christopher loves her, and that love is too weak to save her when it comes into conflict with the life. The final betrayal hurts because the show has spent years making their relationship ugly, tender, stupid, violent, hopeful, and doomed. It never needed to be perfect to be heartbreaking. Real people often grieve relationships that were damaging because the love inside them still existed. Christopher is another reason the show feels real. He is one of television's great portraits of wasted potential because his potential is always tangled with self pity. He wants to be respected, feared, loved, admired, and recognized as special. He wants the rewards of discipline without the discipline. He wants the glory of art without the humility of learning. He wants Tony to be a father, a boss, a sponsor, a mentor, and an audience. No human being could satisfy all those demands, and Tony is one of the worst possible people to try. Christopher's addiction is handled with a harsh kind of honesty. The show does not treat relapse as a single dramatic fall. It shows the boredom, resentment, ego, shame, and social environment around it. Christopher is surrounded by people who mock weakness, drink constantly, and treat emotional honesty as a joke. When he tries to get sober, he is still living inside a culture built on appetite. Every room is a test. Every insult lands harder. Every attempt to grow makes him look strange to the people who helped break him. The intervention scene captures the show's realism perfectly because it is tragic and hilarious without changing tone. Everyone arrives with the stated goal of helping Christopher, and almost nobody is emotionally equipped to do that. They judge him, insult him, expose themselves, and eventually beat him. The comedy comes from how badly they fail at compassion. The sadness comes from the same place. These are people trying to perform care using tools made for domination. Of course, it goes badly. It almost had to. The Sopranos often finds realism in that uncomfortable overlap between comedy and pain. Life rarely separates the two neatly. A funeral can include petty gossip. A medical crisis can include absurd family behavior. A violent man can say something genuinely funny. A stupid joke can reveal a deep wound. Junior slipping into old age is frightening, humiliating, and at times brutally funny. His pride remains even as his mind betrays him. The show allows viewers to laugh at moments that are also sad because human beings often laugh exactly there, right at the edge of discomfort. Junior's decline gives the show another kind of realism, the slow erasure of identity. Earlier in the series, Junior is proud, insecure, witty, petty, and dangerous. He wants respect so badly that it makes him easy to manipulate. Later, dementia strips away the structure he used to protect himself. The tragedy lands because the show remembers who he was. By the end, when Tony visits him and realizes there is almost nothing left to reach, the scene does not beg for tears. It sits in the emptiness. A whole life of schemes, grudges, violence, pride, and family drama ends in a room where even the old stories barely survive. That is a very cold kind of truth. The show's realism also comes from its refusal to give every character a clean arc. Some people change a little. Some become worse. Some learn the right lesson too late. Some learn nothing. Paulie survives because survival is his main gift. Silvio is steady until the world around him collapses. Bobby becomes more involved in violence and loses some of the innocence that made him different. Janice keeps reinventing herself without changing the machinery underneath. Artie Bucco remains trapped between envy and decency, always close enough to Tony's world to be corrupted by it, never strong enough to belong there. Artie is one of the most real characters in the show because his problems are embarrassingly human. He wants to be respected by men he should avoid. He wants excitement without consequences. He wants charm to carry him further than it can. He has a good business, a wife with sense, and a life that could be decent, yet he keeps staring across the street at Tony's power like it contains the version of himself he wishes he had become. His midlife frustration is painful because it is so ordinary. He is surrounded by criminals, and somehow his insecurity still feels like the most familiar thing in the room. The food is part of the realism, too. In The Sopranos, food is never only food. It is comfort, status, family ritual, manipulation, guilt, celebration, and avoidance. People eat after terrible things happen. They bring trays to grieving families. They discuss sauce while lives are falling apart. Tony uses food like emotional glue. Carmela uses hosting as a form of control and identity. Sunday dinner becomes a stage where everyone performs the idea of family while the truth presses against the walls. Food makes the world physical. You can almost smell the kitchens and restaurants. Characters are always chewing, serving, ordering, complaining, reaching across tables, wiping their mouths, and pretending the meal can hold everything together. In a show full of murder, the repeated presence of food makes the violence feel more disturbing because the killers still have appetites. They do not transform after doing evil. They get hungry. That small fact may be more frightening than any speech. Violence in The Sopranos feels real because it is often clumsy, sudden, and ugly. The show rarely lets violence remain stylish for long. A beating is loud and stupid. A murder can be over in seconds. A death can happen in the woods, in a car, in a kitchen. in a parking lot, with no grand meaning attached to the victim's final expression. When Ralph kills Tracy, the scene is horrifying because the show has spent time showing how disposable she is to the men around her. Her death reveals the moral universe they live in. The aftermath reveals even more. The outrage is limited by hierarchy. People are disturbed, but business and status immediately start shaping the response. That is one of the darkest realistic touches in the show. People often know something is wrong and still organize their reaction around convenience. Tony is genuinely disgusted by Ralph, but his disgust is tangled with ego, money, and power. The crew may find something shameful, but rules decide how much they are allowed to care. The moral feeling is there. The moral action is weak. That gap is where much of the show lives. The Sopranos also understands hypocrisy as a daily human habit. These characters are experts at condemning in others what they excuse in themselves. Tony complains about disrespect while disrespecting everyone. He talks about family while destroying families. He wants honesty from people he trains to lie. Carmela wants moral cleanliness without giving up the benefits of corruption. Christopher wants loyalty while constantly betraying himself and others. Paulie talks about principles while bending any rule that threatens his comfort. The show does not present hypocrisy as a rare flaw. It presents it as a survival method. That is why the dreams work. On paper, dream sequences should make a show feel less real. In The Sopranos, they make the world feel more real because the dreams are confusing in the way dreams actually are. They mix fear, guilt, memory, desire, and nonsense. They do not arrive as neat puzzles with one clean answer. Tony's subconscious speaks through strange images, familiar faces, wrong rooms, and feelings he cannot control. The dreams show the part of him that knows more than he wants to admit. The dream sequences also trust the audience. They do not pause to explain every symbol. A fish talks with Big Pussy's voice. A house feels threatening before anything happens. A woman on a staircase can create dread without a full explanation. That kind of storytelling respects the irrational parts of life. People are not only shaped by clear thoughts, they are shaped by images, memories, sensations, and fears they can barely name. The show uses dreams because Tony's waking life is built around denial. Some truths have to come at him sideways. The FBI side of the show adds realism because it is often bureaucratic and imperfect. Agents watch, wait, miss things, pressure informants, get excited, get frustrated, and sometimes treat human beings like pieces on a board. The law is present, but it is not a clean moral force descending from above. It is an institution full of its own routines and compromises. The agents can be right about Tony and still be careless with Adriana. They can pursue justice and still damage people in the process. The show gives the state a texture too. The mob politics feel real because so much of it is petty. These men talk about rules and tradition, but many decisions come down to insecurity, money, ego, embarrassment, and who spoke out of turn. A sit down may sound formal, yet underneath it are old grudges and personal calculations. Someone feels slighted. Someone wants a bigger taste. Someone thinks another man is laughing at him. Someone repeats a joke to the wrong person. The language of honor covers a very human mess. Johnny Sack is a great example. He is intelligent, controlled, and often more polished than the Jersey crew, but his pride around Ginny becomes a political crisis. The joke about his wife is cruel, and his reaction is emotionally understandable, but the scale of the response exposes the absurdity of the world. Men who profit from violence and betrayal suddenly speak as if dignity is sacred. The show lets that contradiction breathe. Johnny's love for Ginny is real. His ego is real. The danger he creates is real. The absurdity is real too. The realness of The Sopranos comes from how often two things can be true at once. Tony can love his children and damage them. Carmela can be a victim of Tony's lies and a partner in the life he provides. Christopher can be abused by Tony and still be dangerous to everyone near him. Junior can be funny and cruel. Livia can be monstrous and wounded. Janice can be manipulative and occasionally perceptive. The show does not ask the audience to pick one clean reading and stay there. It keeps forcing a fuller picture. Livia may be the clearest early example of that. She is theatrical, manipulative, self pitying, and emotionally poisonous. She can destroy a room from a chair. Yet the show never makes her feel like a fantasy villain. Her cruelty has the shape of old misery. She turns helplessness into power. She uses motherhood like a weapon. She speaks in little cuts, complaints, sighs, and accusations. Anyone who has known a person like that recognizes how real the damage feels. Livia rarely needs to raise her voice. She can make guilt do the labor. Tony's relationship with Livia gives the show its emotional foundation. He is a powerful man who still becomes a child around his mother. That is painfully real. Many adults can build entire lives and still collapse emotionally in front of the parent who first taught them fear. Tony can intimidate criminals, but Livia's disapproval reaches a younger part of him. The panic attacks are connected to that buried history. The body remembers what the ego refuses to say. The show is also real because it captures boredom. That sounds strange, but boredom is one of its secret weapons. Characters sit around, they wait for calls, they hang out in back rooms, they repeat stories, they complain, they kill time between scams, meals, affairs, funerals, and crises. The mob life is dangerous, but it is also full of dead air. That dead air makes the sudden violence feel less staged. It also shows why these people create drama. Boredom gives ego too much room. The pacing helps. The Sopranos often lets scenes run a little longer than expected. It allows silences, side comments, and pointless details to stay. A conversation may include business, a joke, a complaint about someone's health, and a small insult that becomes important later. The looseness creates the feeling of life happening beyond the plot. You are watching people exist, not only watching pieces move toward a finale. That approach also affects the endings. Many episodes do not close with a dramatic answer. They end on a look, a song, a private realization, a family image, or a feeling that something has shifted without anyone saying it directly. The famous final cut to black works because the entire show trained the audience to live inside uncertainty. The ending does not suddenly betray the style of the series. It pushes the show's realism to its most aggressive point. Life does not provide a camera angle after the moment you most want one. It cuts off where your certainty ends. The music choices add to the realism because they often create emotional irony rather than simple emphasis. A song can make a scene feel sadder, funnier, colder, or more ordinary. The show uses music like memory. It does not always tell you what to feel. Sometimes it lets a song rub against the scene in a way that makes the moment harder to process. That is closer to how life feels. The wrong song can be playing during the worst day of your life. A perfect song can make a small moment feel permanent. The acting is another major reason the show feels real, and James Gandolfini is the center of it. His performance works because Tony's emotions seem to pass through his whole body. You can see childish joy, wounded pride, suspicion, hunger, rage, and shame move across him before he decides which version of himself to present. He can be charming and terrifying in the same scene because both qualities are alive at once. He does not play Tony as a mastermind every second. He plays him as a man constantly managing impulses he barely understands. Edie Falco matches him by making Carmela's intelligence physical. She can smile through disgust. She can freeze a room with restraint. She can make a small pause feel like years of marriage. Michael Imperioli gives Christopher that open wound quality where every insult seems to confirm something he already fears about himself. Dominic Chianese gives Junior the pride of an old man who knows he is being passed by and cannot survive the humiliation. Nancy Marchand makes Livia feel ancient and sharp, like a curse wearing a housecoat. The performances are large when the characters are large, small when the moment calls for it, and always rooted in behavior. The side characters feel real because they seem to have lives when Tony is not looking. Hesh has his own history. Charmaine has her own moral clarity. Rosalie April carries grief without turning every scene into a speech about grief. Patsy has a quiet sadness and danger that never needs much explanation. Furio arrives with force and later becomes lonely in a way that complicates him. Even someone like Georgie, mostly used for comic abuse, becomes a reminder of how casually cruelty spreads downward in Tony's world. The show's realism also comes from its interest in status. Almost every scene has a hidden status transaction. Who sits where, who pays, who gets interrupted, who gets laughed at, who can make a joke, who has to pretend the joke is funny, who gets to be late, who has to wait, who is allowed to be angry, who has to swallow it. This is how real groups work, especially groups built around power. The Sopranos understands that hierarchy is not only announced through titles, it appears in tiny gestures. That attention to social behavior makes the crew scenes feel alive. The men are always performing for each other. They laugh too hard at Tony's jokes. They test each other with insults. They hide fear under sarcasm. They turn cruelty into bonding. They speak about loyalty while constantly measuring weakness. The back room at Satriale's can feel warm for a second, almost like a clubhouse, until someone becomes the target. The warmth is real. The threat inside it is real too. The show is honest about masculinity in a way that still feels sharp. These men are obsessed with strength because they are terrified of shame. They cannot process sadness without turning it into anger. They cannot admit fear without attacking someone weaker. They want mothers, lovers, wives, servants, therapists, and audiences, while pretending they need nobody. Their entire world is built around the performance of control, and the show keeps showing how little control they actually have. Tony's panic attacks are the perfect symbol for that. His body tells the truth. He can intimidate a room, cheat on his wife, order violence, and lecture people about toughness, but he cannot stop his own nervous system from exposing him. That physical vulnerability makes him feel real because it cuts through the mythology of the gangster. Power does not protect him from memory. Money does not protect him from anxiety. Violence does not protect him from grief. He keeps trying to dominate the outside world because the inside one is chaos. The Sopranos also feels real because it captures the weird moral laziness of modern life. Characters know more than they admit. They sense when something is wrong. They make jokes to escape it. They change the channel. They go shopping. They eat. They talk about school, sports, real estate, and business as if the central corruption is a weather condition. The show keeps returning to the American dream with rot underneath it, the big house, the college fund, the car, the vacation, the restaurant, the respectable suit, the church donation. Everything looks normal from a distance. Up close, the money has a smell. That is why the suburban setting is so important. Tony is not living in a shadowy castle. He lives in a nice house with a driveway, a pool, neighbors, ducks, arguments, and family events. The violence funding that life does not erase the normality of it. It makes the normality more disturbing. The show understands that evil often wants a comfortable home. It wants central air, good food, nice schools, and a place at the table. The ducks in the pilot capture that perfectly. Tony becomes attached to them because they represent something he cannot hold on to: family, innocence, peace, a natural order that might leave without warning. It could have been too obvious, but the show makes it work because Tony's reaction is strange, sincere, and embarrassing. He cannot say what he feels, so the feeling attaches itself to animals in the pool. That is real psychology. People often reveal themselves through the thing they accidentally care about. The Sopranos never became real by pretending to be a documentary. It became real by understanding contradiction, routine, appetite, memory, language, and denial. It knew that people rarely explain themselves clearly. They reveal themselves in how they treat waiters, how they talk to their mothers, how they handle boredom, how they spend money, how they apologize, how they avoid apologizing, and how they behave when nobody is rewarding goodness. The show also trusted ugliness. It allowed characters to be racist, sexist, selfish, ignorant, sentimental, funny, boring, and cruel without polishing them into modern audience comfort. That does not mean the show agrees with them. It means the show knows the world it is portraying. The discomfort is part of the accuracy. These people say things people actually say in rooms where they feel safe from judgment. The realism comes from the lack of sanitizing. At the same time, The Sopranos avoids making everyone constantly monstrous. That would be easier and less truthful. The characters have birthdays, anxieties, favorite foods, sick relatives, money problems, bad jokes, loneliness, and moments of tenderness. A murderer can worry about his kid. A selfish person can grieve deeply. A hypocrite can say something true. That complexity does not soften the evil. It makes the evil harder to dismiss as something separate from ordinary humanity. By the end of the series, the realness becomes almost suffocating. The world has changed, people have died, relationships have collapsed, and yet much of life continues with the same gestures. Sit down, order food, look over your shoulder, pretend the family is still intact, pretend the damage can be managed. Pretend the next song on the jukebox might carry everyone safely through the moment. The final scene in Holston's works because it gathers the whole show into something painfully ordinary. A family meets for dinner. Meadow parks badly. Tony watches the door. Carmela sits down. AJ repeats a small piece of optimism he has borrowed from his father. Onion rings arrive. People move in the background. The scene is calm and tense because Tony's life has made calm impossible. Whether the cut means death or the permanent fear of death, the feeling is the same. This is the life he built, and he has to sit inside it. That is the real answer to why The Sopranos felt so real. It understood that life does not stop being ordinary when it becomes tragic. The worst people still have routines. The funniest moments can happen beside disaster. Families can love each other and ruin each other in the same afternoon. A man can know the truth about himself and still choose the lie because the lie lets him keep the house, the power, the food, the image, and one more day without changing. The Sopranos felt real because it made drama out of behavior rather than speeches. It paid attention to how people actually dodge truth, how they use jokes, how they repeat family patterns, how they turn money into morality, how they confuse comfort with happiness, and how they keep living after moments that should have changed them. Tony Soprano is memorable because he feels impossible and familiar at the same time. He is extreme in action, ordinary in appetite, childish in pain, sharp in business, blind in his own home, and human in ways that never rescue him from judgment. The world around him feels real because it is built from the same contradictions. Nobody is clean. Nobody is simple. Nobody escapes the past just because they found better furniture. That is why the show still holds up. It was never only about whether Tony would get caught, killed, redeemed, or exposed. It was about the daily life of a man who had everything people are told to want and still walked around like something inside him was starving. It was about a family living inside a lie so long that the lie became part of the wallpaper. It was about America work, status, appetite, parents, children, therapy, money, death, and the strange human talent for adapting to corruption when the food is good and the house is warm. The Sopranos felt real because it knew the scariest thing about Tony's world was not how different it was from normal life. The scariest thing was how easily normal life made room for it.